Hello to all of you. It is Thursday afternoon, 4 p.m, so it must be time for another teissTalk. I'm your host, author and investigative journalist Jeff White. We're here live every Thursday at 4 p.m. My co-host, Jenny Radcliffe, who, excitingly, was inducted into the InfoSec Hall of Fame only this morning, takes care of the Tuesday afternoon sessions at 4 p.m. So you can join us live Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. For all the latest in tech security. All the talks are archived, of course, on the teissTalk website. So if you want to catch up on any of them, you can go there. But you're with us live, which is where it all happens and where it all matters. By the way, if you listen to the podcast version of this, hello to all of you, wherever you're listening on your headphones or wherever you are. If you want to listen to the video version, see the video version, you obviously get to see our lovely shiny faces, but also get to enjoy the entire program as opposed to the edited highlights, which I think is what happens on the podcast. So do whiz over to the teissTalk site and join us, as I say, live every Tuesday and Thursday, 4 p.m. Hello to all of you who are coming back and visited us before. It's good to see all of you. And hello to our new guests as well, new visitors. If you're new, do pop it in the chat window there. It's great to see new people. And you may get the opportunity to win yourself a teissTalk mug, the coveted teissTalk mug. The chat window is all yours. You can stick all your comments in there. If you think we're talking nonsense, do stick it in there. If you've got something to add, an experience you want to share, stick it in the chat. There's also the Q&A section. There we can submit your questions for myself or your guests. And we will occasionally be throwing up a few polls. So we are going to be discussing a key topic today. But before we do that, I need to A, make a confession, and B, give away a mug. I went to InfoSec yesterday, as some of you will have seen, the very, very big tech security show in London, which is a hoot. And I did manage to gate crash a number of parties in the evening. So I'm feeling somewhat fragile today. Today has not been a particularly productive day, I will be absolutely honest. So I'm going to give the teissTalk mug, the prestigious teissTalk mug, to anybody who can guess how many parties I successfully gate crashed yesterday at InfoSec. How many parties I successfully gate crashed. We're not going into how many I tried to gate crash, just the successful ones. If you get the number right, the first one to get it wins themselves a teissTalk mug. So do get involved. Do have a pop. Simon said 7. Ambitious, not the right answer. We're going to be talking today on the teissTalk session about a really interesting topic, which comes up every now and again. We are focusing on it particularly at the moment, reducing the cyber risk to your operational technology. And if you're thinking to yourself that, you know, you've got no interest in OT because you don't own a power station, think again. By which I don't mean think again as to whether you own a power station. Obviously, you know whether you own a power station. You don't have to sort of think twice about that. But no, think again as to whether you have operational technology, because OT isn't just about massive switches out in electrical substations. It also extends a bit broader than that, as our panel are going to be talking to us about today. And talking about panel, we have a couple of great people. Jordi Mullers from Equans, Netherlands, was going to be joining us, but is unfortunately off ill today. So we wish him a very speedy recovery to Jordi. Apologies, he can't be with us. Later on, though, we're going to be hearing from Adnan Ahmed, who's head of ICT and CISO at Ornua. And if you don't know what Ornua do, stay tuned. He will enlighten us. But for the moment, I want to talk to our first guest on this, who's Felipe Garcia Vivanco. He's CISO at Scotiabank and is a friend of the show, has been on before. So we welcome Felipe to the show. By the way, guesses in terms of how many parties I tried to gate crash. We've had a couple of guesses. 5, 3. No, not the right answer so far, but keep guessing. Keep guessing. You're pretty close. Felipe, how are you doing and where are you joining us from?
Hello, Jeff, and I'm meeting from Mexico City, so it's very early over here. And I'm also guessing how many parties you gate crashed yesterday.
Go on. How many do you think?
I think that a pair.
You think, well, how many?
2, a pair.
2. Well, Felipe, you got the right answer, but you were beaten to the punch by, Simon Yakan. Simon gets in there with 2. It was a numbers game in the end. So Simon wins the free teissTalk mug, winging its way to you. Our Teiss Goblin will sort that out for you, Simon. Well done to you. And Felipe, what's the big tech security? Is there a big tech security conference in Mexico? What are the big ones over there?
Yeah, we have some big security conference over here the past days. However, as you might imagine, the business has been very busy. And having RSA in US, having this kind of conferences has been also a way to get into into some more ideas right now. I have been in a pair also over here the last 2 weeks, and it has been very interesting how the trends are moving and how the fraudsters are intending to do its own business, and they are going really fine.
Interesting stuff. We're going to be talking about our key topic in a bit, which is going to be OT security. But before we do that, we just want to discuss an item that's been in the news recently, which actually ties in quite nicely to this. It's an article that Felipe spotted in Security Week, that August publication written by Eduard Kovacs, about OT security and Fortinet's State of Operational Technology and Cybersecurity report, this year's report. Felipe, what stood out about this to you? What drew your attention to this one?
It was a very interesting article in detail. I think that we don't realize that sometimes that much of the goods and the things that we purchase every time depends on an OT system. It has PLCs, it has SCADA, and we are more into the cybersecurity field, always looking for IT systems. And when you realize the criticality of these kind of systems, you realize how the ATPs are right now targeting them. And the numbers that this article had were really impressive for me, being more into the banking field for years. But also part of my career in the past was done in a very big manufacturing company that depend a lot of PLCs and SCADA systems. At that time, some discussions with the senior management were really interesting into the field of how we can protect the systems that at sometimes had a life of 50 years to produce some kind of goods. And you were dependent of a flavor of operating system into the machine that was very old, that you didn't have maintenance, that you didn't have the tooling that you currently can have into a proper IT system. And one of the numbers that really make me understand how bad the problem is right now is that 40% of OT incidents go into an outage, and that for a company can be losing its main production facility for some hours, but the reality is that you will lose it for days. You will need to enable the things and go properly into a good remediation and execution and understanding what has failed. And also what impressed me is that when we are talking about IT systems and how you are logging all these systems, you take to your centralized system, to your CM, and you understand the correlations and you take decisions. For OT systems, it's not always happening. And while you have a big number of companies right now centralizing this kind of logging and understanding them, is not all the companies. And you always have the dependency that when you don't have this system centralized, understanding what is happening there, you can have an operator just delivering an USB into the system, and it can have a kind of malware, something that can disrupt everything, and you cannot understand and analyze it. So where was really opening my head to some kind of analysis, this article that you shared to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you talked about, this is, so just to outline, this is Fortinet's report. And I think someone in the chat said that there's never enough detail in the articles. If you click on the article, there is actually a link to the report itself on Fortinet's website. I'll actually copy that link and stick it in the chat, because you're right, you want to go through the whole report and see what's going on. Let's just put that in there and see if that works. But one of the interesting things was, Felipe, you talked about, so this is a survey of 500 OT professionals, 28 countries, mainly America, Western Europe, APAC, some African and Middle East countries. And you mentioned, 40% of global cybersecurity incidents affected organizations with operational technology systems, resulted in outages, but then it goes on to say that put physical safety at risk. So that was a striking thing for me, that basically this isn't just, the factory shutting down for a while. There's actually a potential, potential safety concern here, Felipe.
Yeah, completely. You have well secured your facility, and in some way you have this kind of physical failure of the system, and you have operators there, and can happen something catastrophic. And we have we all that we are into the cyber world, we know that some actors at some time they made some kind of malware to disrupt uranium devices that can enhance uranium, and they have just a very specific set of malware that disrupted this kind of machines in the past, and this was made in specific for Iran. And if you realize that this kind of malware can disrupt these machines, and you are talking about radioactive material, and this was done in a specific for one country, if this is extrapolated to go ahead, all the companies that can have different devices, different PLCs, SCADA systems, and you know that for many of the companies, they are saying that they have really secure systems, but they do not have this kind of real assessments of vulnerabilities and that kind of stuff. This really delivers the responsibility to you as the owner of these kind of systems to really secure them and make them less that they can receive less kind of attacks. So it's a complex situation that they are living, the companies that have these kind of systems, because they never were thought to have security embedded in them. They were made for operations to produce, and they haven't been thought, the ones that we have in the past, to be well secure as a facility that you always know that has been thought as to be secure for everyone that is there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and the other thing that struck out me from this report, Felipe, was the numbers. It said 93% of OT organizations experienced one cybersecurity incident in the last 12 months, which, I mean, to be honest, didn't really surprise me. What really stunned me was there were some companies here that have had 10 plus intrusions in the past year, and that's sort of 10%. So they're having them. It's not just, one in the last few months. It's every month some of these organizations are getting hit, and that's across the board. That's globally 7%, but in Europe, in Asia Pacific, you're talking about these OT organizations getting attacked monthly. It's absolutely astonishing.
It's astonishing. And if you think it in some way, how many non adequate access you have in a facility when you have it well protected? You don't have that kind of accesses. You don't have accidents very often in a facility, but you are having a lot of intrusions. So something really interesting is happening into the cyber world, that you don't have the proper controls to really understand what is happening and to mitigate before time these kind of intrusions. So there's a lot of space of work there. And the companies, we need to understand how the actors are really making its business.
Yeah. That's interesting. By the way, there's a quick discussion of Stuxnet in the chat, which obviously, yes, of course, was a classic OT attack, albeit a very, very well-crafted and extremely expensive one. I've just put a link in the chat for those of you who haven't read it to Kim Zetter's book, Countdown to Zero, which is really, really, really fantastic. If you haven't read it, it's a fantastic Countdown to Zero Day, I should say. It's a fantastic book and goes into the Stuxnet attack. Is, according to a very good source of mine, one of the very few cybersecurity books that is absolutely accurate and hasn't got any mistakes in it, which I probably can't say the same for my books. But if you haven't read it, it's a really good read. Felipe, hold it there. I'm going to bring in our other guest, Adnan Ahmed, who's head of ICT and Chief Information Security Officer at UNRWA, and is joining us from, well, Adnan, where are you joining us from?
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
I'm joining from Dublin, Ireland. I'm working as head of ICT and CISO at UNRWA.
Right.
UNRWA is a dairy cooperative headquartered in Dublin, and we are largest exporter of dairy products. You may have heard few brands, like we have Kerrygold brand, which is worth over €1 billion.
Yeah, if you've used Kerrygold butter, then that comes from UNRWA. It is, I have to say, well done to you, Adnan, and your company, because normally when I read company descriptions and company websites, they make absolutely no sense to me as to what the company actually does. Whereas Ornua, on your LinkedIn page, it is a very clear description of what the company does and what you're in charge of. Dairy farmers in Ireland
Yeah,
exporting around the world.
and we are proud of what we do for our dairy farmers. So we have over 1,000 farmers that we are representing, and so we work for them. Technically, they are our stakeholders.
Yeah.
So one of our main brand is Kerry Gold is the second biggest
Yeah.
brand in US and number one in Germany.
Fantastic. We've seemingly lost Felipe. I don't know whether he's dialed off and thought his work was done. He's done the opening comments, but no, we want you back, Felipe. If you're listening, we're not done with you yet. Hopefully, his webcam will get sorted out now. And Adnan, I've got to ask: do you get discounts on products? Do you get free Kerrygold butter?
No, unfortunately not. I don't really get any discounts. I pay the same price as you guys, as
Darn
public
it.
is paying.
Okay, fair enough. Well, listen, it's interesting. I was going to talk with Felipe about this, but obviously for you guys, operational technology is presumably part of the business. Can you give us a sense, somewhere like Ornua, of the scale of that? What sort of OT kit have you got, and what sort of software and hardware is it run by?
So we have variety of kits depending on the factories. Some of the factories we have are state-of-the-art factories where you hardly find people. They are mostly automated by different technologies, robots. And some factories are half automated. So it depends on the factories, and we use different vendors, global vendors. So it's not the one technology. That's one of the challenge we face in this industry, that every factory, even though they're producing the same type of products, may be using different technologies. So even the full scalability awareness of this and the availability of those equipment is very, very important for us. So first you need to know what you have, and unless you don't know what you have, how do you protect those things? So you need to first figure it out, your crown jewels within the factories, and those equipments. Once you know, you identify your crown jewels, and then you have a specific categorized way of risk assessment on those devices, that what you want to protect, rather than trying to protect everything.
Yeah. Felipe, I was going to ask you about this, because obviously Scotiabank, a bank, I think some people might be surprised that OT is something that you're interested in. To what extent do you have OT then, and how do you define OT as opposed to IT in someone like Scotiabank?
Well, I think that every company has OT systems. You have air conditioning, you have your facilities, you have all these kind of systems there, and you need also to monitor them. You have your facility, you have your buildings, you have your offices, your branches, and you depend also into these kind of assets. So that's why we are always interested in seeing the trends, what we are facing, and you know that the bad actors are always looking for the most easy way of getting into your systems. So why not having in mind the OT systems? It's really important. And yesterday that I was doing some kind of thinking about these articles that you shared, Jeff, I was thinking that the OT systems, while we are looking to them like big systems that we are not so in deep with them every time. We live with them. But some other systems that are more common right now are getting inheritage of these kind of systems because they never had security as the main part of its development. And this is Internet of Things. So they are very similar OT systems to Internet of Things in the way they are designed, and that you don't have the proper security of them. And you have OT systems even when where you are living, but also you have Internet of Things systems in your laundry system, in your TV, and they are more propense to attacks and to have some kind of a breach from a third party.
Yeah, interesting. Apologies, I'm baking in here, so I just took my jacket off. Felipe, can I stay with you on that then? Because obviously you've talked about things like heating systems. Simon's mentioned building management systems, which you're right. Scotiabank will have those systems in place. How much control, though, do you have over them? How many of those are installed by a third party somewhere and run by somebody else? And how much do you actually sort of directly have control over?
That's a good point, Jeff. You have always third parties correlated with your operations, and you need to assess to every third party its cybersecurity controls, its practices, to have them supporting you. And you always, when you are in cybersecurity, you go into these kind of assessments of cost benefit in which systems you have much of your visibility because they have critical information, criticality for your operation, and in others you need to deliver these kind of controls to third parties. I think that every company has this kind of situation and this kind of decisions to do about how you control the third party and how much management you do among them, and that's a thing that we need to think more about. I think that that will be a trend and has been a trend for years, and it's something to put in the table with the management. I think that that's a good point.
Yeah. Adnan, I'll come to you on this in a second. I just wanted to, while I remembered, we have got a physical event coming up for Teiss, which obviously we do these teissTalks very regularly, but we are now doing a physical event which is going to be in London later in the year, 8th of September, I think I'm right in saying. So I'll put in a link in there if you want to actually come and see us physically live in the flesh, me and Jenny, and indeed lots of other exhibitors as well. That's where you can do it, 8th of September. Click on there and get your tickets or attendances now. That will be good to see you all live. Adnan, can I come to you then? Because obviously you've also got the usual lighting, heating systems and so on for Ornua, but you've also got, as you've said, factories that are almost entirely automated. How much control do you have over all of those systems, the technology, the hardware, also the software? Or are you again working through sort of third parties to control all that stuff?
The hardware and software, it is quite challenging, to be honest with you, in OT world, because not all equipment are same. Like if you're talking about IT world, it's easy. You're talking about Windows server, Linux based server. So these are just servers you're managing. You need to make sure you're patching. When you're even talking about the OT equipment, they range from different. They could be SCADA machines. You could have temperature sensor. You may have factory production line where you may have metal detector. And these are totally different types of equipments. So alignment between IT and OT is very, very important to make sure you work together rather than work against each other. So in terms of control, the area that you normally look into when the data is being collected from these devices, are you monitoring the data? Are you making sure that you have the whole visibility of what exactly is connected to your network? Same as when you are talking about third-party vendors. Yes, we do have third-party vendors who do connect to our SCADA and PLC machines. They have to, because we are providing, some of our factories are running 24/7. So we have to give them access to manage those devices. What if something is not working? The minute one of the device is stopped, the minute you start losing money, because that's production. If my laptop is compromised, or if my laptop is broken, it's not going to cost company downtime. But if a device in the factory is stopped working for some reason, then it's going to cost you money. Cost you breaches of your contracts with your supplier and with your customers that you promise to deliver goods on time. So in terms of the availability, make sure that you have the visibility of what equipments are connected, where they are connected, whether they are segregated or not, and how they are being used and accessed by third-party vendors. So you need to make sure you have these monitoring tools in place to make sure you are keeping an eye on malicious activity.
Adnan, I'll stay with you. What Simon's put a comment in the chat, which is interesting. I had a crane supplier where I had to ask them to remove their modem to stop changes being made to software without our knowledge. It's a really interesting question. Adnan, I want to sort of follow up with you then. You've obviously got people, companies who are installing these bits of kit. I mean, for a start, how confident are you that you know all the different bits of kit out in the field that are being used? I mean, do you have to go factory to factory? Do you have some system for keeping an eye on this? Because I can see a situation where, a factory owner somewhere might think, oh, this is great, I'll install this. This will help me with X problem. How easy is it for you to stay on top of all that installation stuff?
I think you need to do the vendor assessment before you let any new vendor
Right.
bring their equipment to. So you need to make sure that you do the security assessment of the particular supplier, what they are
Mm.
providing it. Are they ISO 27001 accredited? Are they IEC 6443 accredited? So to make sure that do they have those process policies in place? Because in some
Yeah.
cases you have to give those suppliers VPN access, which means that you're
Mm.
trusting that organization to gain access to your organization. You're not going to
Mm.
trust an organization who is not qualified and who have not gone through the series of rigorous testing protocols.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's one of the main important thing. You need to make sure you trust those suppliers and making
Yeah.
sure you have tools in place to monitor those devices rather
Yeah.
than give them blanket access. The another
Yeah.
important thing in that case is to make sure that you restrict that access to particular device,
Mm.
because most of these OT equipments are connected together. They form. You can't see them in isolation. So
Mm.
you may have one PLC connected to another device which may be doing metal detector, another one is doing something else.
Yeah.
So they're all connected together. So you need to make sure, and they all are coming from different vendors. So it's a challenge to
Mm.
OT
Mm.
industry. I'm not
Yeah.
dealing with one vendor who is working on one production line. So
Yeah.
you're maybe dealing with three vendors. So, but
Yeah.
what you need to make sure that if something goes wrong, you can restrict that access to particular device, particular OT system, rather than
Yeah.
let it spread across the
Yeah.
whole factory. So that's the
Yeah.
biggest challenge you have. So it's a check and balance and make sure you know what is being connected. You need to make sure, have you done your due diligence, have you done your security risk assessment against supplier,
Yeah.
against the equipment.
Yeah.
Another thing we do it is make sure the equipment that we are buying, is this equipment is IEC 62443 certified. It means that they have already done those check and balances when they produce that equipment. um,
Right.
of the security is the last thing that OT vendors used to deal with or used to worry about it. So now in IT world, it's very common, security by design. When you buy a software, you just ask about security. But in
Mm.
OT, these vendors, all global players, are now beginning to realize that they are going to lose business if they don't
Mm.
look after the security patches.
Yeah.
And same as the awareness within the operations teams to make sure that it's very common. Like when you talk about IT, you patch your computer. If there is a
Mm.
zero-day
Mm.
vulnerability, you patch your laptops, you patch your servers. But
Yeah.
you talk to operations guys, it's something new to them that you're talking to them. Oh, I need to patch your PLC device.
Mm. Mm.
And as often as I patch my Windows servers,
Mm. Mm.
then there are different questions to be asked. Okay, if you ask them, okay, I want to patch your PLC because of that vulnerability. Now the
Yeah.
decision is, who owns that device? Is it IT is owning that device or OT is owning the device? What happens if
Mm.
patch goes wrong? In
Mm.
most cases, you don't have a production or non-production type system. You have only production systems.
Yeah.
So how do you really test a patching? Like in IT world, is very easy. You have a non-production environment, production environment. You test a small group of non-production machines,
Mm.
validate that patch, and go. So
Yeah.
there are ways around it, but it's just more difficult.
Yeah.
Uh, One of the rule I really like about Gartner mentioned that 80% of the problems that you see in, it's called 80-20 rule. 80% of the problems that you see in OT can be
Mm.
fixed by IT. It's the
Mm.
remaining 20% which are specific to OT that you need to be more worried about. You need to make sure
Yeah.
you have controls in place, because some of the OT equipments don't even use IP based systems. They have their
Mm.
own protocols to be followed. So you have to make sure
Mm.
you look after those devices. Felipe has actually mentioned a great point about IoT devices. So it's very simple, vendors normally think, oh, we are going to connect these IoT devices and looking for OE, operational efficiency is very common thing. They just connect
Mm.
these Raspberry Pi devices, and we are going to show you a nice chart of how good, how quick you are producing stuff, how responsive your workforce is. But
Mm.
what operations people don't realize is the bringing an OT equipment into your factory brings challenges to
Yeah.
IT. How do
Yeah.
we make sure we monitor those devices as well?
Yeah, interesting. Thanks, Adnan. By the way, I put in another link to another book there, which is Andy Greenberg's book, Sandworm, which I'm reading at the moment, which talks about the power outages in Ukraine in 2015 and 2016. And it was PLCs, I think I'm right in saying Siemens PLCs out in the field that were hit as part of that. Felipe, I just wondered with you, obviously Scotiabank, massive bank, lots of branches in different places. How standardized is the OT picture for you? Is it same stuff in all the branches, or do you have to kind of tweak it depending where you are? How does that work for you guys?
Uh, I think that every company that is in many countries has different OT systems. It depends of the vendors that you have there, and you have well, for us we have a lot of branches, and you depend on third parties to have those branches, to have those buildings, and you have different vendors. So
Mm,
in some way we don't have, and I think that any bank in the world has standardized everything regarding its
mm, mm,
OT systems, and that make it more complex. And as Aiden was saying, we really need to think of different vendors to have some reliability on what we are doing. And
mm,
he had right now a great point, and I was thinking right now about the way of really doing the fixes to its security when you just have this production system that is giving you what you need. You don't
mm,
have anything to test, and when you have different flavors for the OT systems that you have in different places, it's very complex to standardize what you are
mm.
deploying, and
Yeah.
that make it really complex a way to articulate and really have everything well secured
Mm,
in a specific time. So you will
yeah.
have always opportunity, sir.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I was going to go to you, Adnan, on that because you've got factories running 24 hours a day. How easy is it to start retrofitting security into things that may not have had good security initially? You might need to stop the factory for a few hours to run an update, to install something that's more secure. You're going to have to, Adnan, you're going to have to interrupt business, aren't you, sometimes to make the security better? Does that happen? Is that something you deal with?
Yeah, I think you picked the right point. It's around challenge to agree with the business why a patching is so important for an OT equipment.
Hmm.
So in over the last few years, we looked into any operating system that is not secure. Make sure that we replace all of them to make sure
Hmm.
that the system that we can control in IT, they are being patched, they are being controlled, they are being monitored. So the way we normally look for around patching cycles and also updates to those equipments is we're looking for different times. Could be cleaning happening during lunch hour when they are doing cleaning or something,
Right.
and when there is a
Yeah.
shift change is happening. So, but it is challenging. And also, you need to make sure that you have resources available from both IT and OT when this is happening. You also
Hmm.
have business engagement available to make sure
Hmm.
that you are keep providing an update to the GM of that particular factory why something is changing.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so you have to case it's not as slick and it's not as easy to do patching or updates to an OT equipment as compared to
Hmm.
an IT equipment. IT
Hmm.
equipment mostly centralized. You have one place, whether you're on-prem in cloud, you're managing it. You
Yeah.
just inform your business. OT is in every factory you have OT equipments and
Right.
different
Yeah.
types of equipment, different vendors, different types of patches you're talking about.
Hmm.
So you need to make sure that, and then what you do, you prioritize based on your crown jewels, where your crown
Yeah.
jewels are. You need to
Hmm.
first protect them and making sure that it's not only protecting via patching, you also need to see that which device is exposed to
Hmm.
your suppliers. Is
Hmm.
this device exposed to any other system where it should not be exposed to? Can
Hmm.
you restrict the movement of that device? Is this machine
Yeah.
connected to
Yeah.
your ERP? How you're controlling that thing? So
Yeah.
it's a combination of number of things rather than one.
Yeah. Felipe, can I come to you? Simon's put a good comment in the chat. A major name brand supplies an instrument used in motor control with a hard-coded four-digit password. So that's the other thing, Felipe. Even if you've worked out what OT you've got, even if you've gone to the suppliers, do you sometimes come up against a hurdle where the piece of kit just doesn't doesn't you can't secure it? It's beyond help.
Yeah, and I think that when you are purchasing something right now
Mm,
in this year 2022, you are thinking that they have delivered the minimum set of controls
mm,
and good practices into anything that you are buying. And
yeah,
at sometimes results that some vendor in its main code has just delivered a four-digit password, and they have usernames that they're very generic and that they
mm,
didn't went into a secure development life cycle.
mm,
And you are thinking, because this is a big name brand, because they make very good PLCs, and you know that they have in different factories in the world, you
mm,
trust them. And when you really take one expert to do an assessment of that kind of systems, you then get a report that is really scary. And you need to work a lot of time. And Nan was saying really the thing. You have more set of controls for IT devices, but for OT, I think that there is still a big roads to go ahead, learn from it, set new kind of controls, of
Mm,
ideas, of frameworks, so we can standardize more what we are doing into that field.
mm,
Because we depend as a world of these kind of systems. They are the ones that make the things to us to live,
yeah,
to eat, to move. So how we can secure more these kind of companies?
yeah, it's interesting. By the way, Misan in the chat says, late to the conversation. Well, it should have been on time. Can I get a full recording later? Yes, the recordings are all saved on the teissTalk website. So if you look there, all of our talks for the past more than a year are all there. So please feel free to dive in. And Paul's made a good point, which says, apologies if this has already been discussed. No, it hasn't. Do engineers even have a relationship with security yet? I've observed significant language and cultural barriers in the past. Is the situation changing? Are they friends yet? Exactly what I was going to move on to next, Paul. Well done, you preempted me. Adnan, let's talk about this, the security awareness, security culture, when you're dealing with engineers, on the heavy side, shall we say. How does that go?
You're absolutely right. It's the gap that you see in across different global companies, whereby OT is working on its own and IT is working on their own.
Mm,
And if you keep working in parallel, you won't go anywhere, or you're working
yeah,
against each other, you won't go anywhere, because it's the
mm,
joint responsibility. So even with respect to training is very important. How do you train your OT employees? You need to make sure, encourage your employees to use the best judgment. How what is wrong with something, you need to give them a clear direction. You need to make sure that you work on their behaviors when they're looking for any breaches. So it's not only about sending them a security training and then this is how you do it. You need to make
mm,
sure the security training, for example, is embedded in their joiner process. When they join it, you set the
mm,
expectation that this is what we are expecting them to do job, and making
yeah,
sure that from time to time you're assigning them specific related modules that could empower them to make those decisions, and
yeah,
empower them to make sure that they understand, they can find out the breach detections. If something is happening, don't stay and don't say anyone. So
yeah,
you need to make sure you're looking, and it's not only about a malware I'm talking about, it's about the physical security. What
mm,
about if
mm,
there is a tailgating happening and no one is telling you? So you need to
mm,
make sure you make them buddies, OT guys, engineers, working them hand in hand. And if
yeah,
things are happening, we are part of the food industry, and food
yeah,
contamination is a big thing for us from
yeah,
security perspective, which
yeah,
some people may think it's not really an IT security thing, but in some
mm,
instance they are right. But what if a bad actor is getting into your factory? You don't know the
yeah,
motivation of that
yeah,
bad
yeah, yeah,
actor.
yeah,
Could be
yeah,
going into server room to unplug a cable, or
yeah,
could be going into the food high risk and low risk areas to
yeah,
contaminate your food. So you
yeah,
have to make sure you work them together
yeah,
as one. So your security program should look
yeah,
after all those aspects of it.
yeah,
That it's
interesting.
not only about emails, because some of those factory workers don't even have an email address because their job is just to produce butter. But then
Yeah,
how do
mm,
you train them?
yeah, it's interesting.
There is a difficulty in training. You need to make sure you have a lunch and learn sessions,
Yeah,
understanding around physical security and all those different types of security that you do with your IT people. You have to do the same thing with your OT people. I
yeah,
would say
interesting.
even more, because the type of audience that you're dealing with are
Yeah,
different types of audience.
yeah, interesting. Felipe, and just aware we're coming up against the end of time, but Felipe, I wondered for you, because obviously Adnan's got people out in factories and running the kits and so on. Felipe, for you, is this more? Do you actually have folks like that, or are you more working through third parties who install this stuff for you, and you're trying to have the conversation with them, or have you got Scotiabank employees who you're trying to get through to in the same way that Adnan's trying to get through to his colleagues?
We have different schemas. I think that this work for everyone the same way. But you got really good point here, Jeff. What are you about doing with training and awareness, and how you deliver these cultural changes and make them aware of what we are facing? We have very good right now areas regarding information security. And one of our main concerns and activities right now is to make all the people that is working within our company, our employees, and also third parties being aware of the risks that we're facing and deliver them the tools. They need to understand what they are facing every time in physical security, in information security, logical, whatever.
Yeah.
And an employee cannot find an USB and then deploy it into its machine. That should be very logical for everyone, for a people that is doing physical security or even a member of the board. So these kind of ideas are part of the cultural changes that we need to deliver, of the things that we need to train the people so that we can reduce the possible exposure that we have. And that just really 0 day or situations that are not probably well controlled because we didn't know them, they can be the ones that can be hitting us because they are really effective and we're not in the industry. But the other ones, if you have the human factor that you always know that that's the most sensible part of the change, you can have a better understanding and you can have them as your protectors. They can be the first line. So I think that we have a lot of things to do into that field. And at least for us here in the banking industry in Mexico, one of the main topics that we talk every time is about awareness. And it's not your awareness of employees and third parties, it's also about customers. And if you are delivering these kind of messages, you are starting to make all the environment more secure and more secure and more secure. So I think that should be the tendency, and also for OT with all the vendors and all the people that are doing this stuff there.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. It's been really, really good chat. That I'm glad we got to hook into OT, and as I say, it goes much wider, as you've said, than if you just own a factory, you're in charge of OT, and if you don't, you're not. But look, let's something completely different for the end of the show. We're going to do our either or question. Would you rather? And if you want to watch, if you want to join in from home, our would you rather question today is: would you rather lose your sense of taste or your sense of smell? There's a poll going up. You'll see on the right-hand side of your screen in the polls area. So cast your votes, viewers. Would you rather lose your sense of taste or your sense of smell? Some of you during the COVID period may have experienced one or other of these. While you're voting, I'm going to ask our panelists, Adnan, interesting one for you, working close to the dairy business. Would you rather lose your sense of taste or your sense of smell? What do you think?
I think it's unlikely to lose sense of smell before you lose sense of taste. That's my 2 cents on it. So I would think it's sense of taste.
Fair enough. All right, Felipe, what do you think? Would you lose the taste or the smell if you were forced to?
I will go for the smell. I really love tacos, and I don't want to lose the taste of the tacos. So that's it.
Fair enough. All right. Well, our poll results are: would you rather lose your sense of taste or sense of smell? Most people would rather lose sense of smell rather than sense of taste. Interesting. Let's not put this one to the test. Anyway, look, thanks for that. Thanks for taking part and obliging me, and a bit of fun at the end there. I want to thank our guests on today's show, Felipe Garcia Vivanco, who's Chief Information Security Officer at Scotiabank, and of course, Adnan Ahmed, who's Head of ICT and CISO at Ornua. Both of their LinkedIn profiles are in the chat, but you can also find them, I'm sure, on LinkedIn. Do connect with them. Next week on Tuesday, normally it's Jenny Radcliffe, my co-host on Tuesday, but she's off. It's Tom Langford who's going to be joining. If you don't know Tom, great guy, really super experienced in the industry and a very friendly chap. So it's going to be great to see him on the ones and twos tomorrow, next week at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, talking about securely onboarding new suppliers, which is, yes, absolutely a topic. And how do you get those people on, and what questionnaires do you give them, and all of that sort of stuff. So do join us next Tuesday. I'll be back next Thursday at 4 p.m. Have a great rest of the week and a good weekend. In the meanwhile, thanks again to Adnan and Felipe, and thanks to all of you for watching. See you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.